And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the ToolBelt, episode 266. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday edition. Today, we have another special guest. Stay tuned. We will be back after our short intro from our sponsors.
TC Backer. Roofing, siding, windows, gutters, solar. Roofing, siding, windows, gutters, solar. TC Backer.
Is your lead flow down? Whether you're a company owner, office staff, salesperson, or installer, you're a roofing rock star. We help you get more leads with custom SEO, Google Ads, and a pro website.
Welcome to Behind the Tool Belt, where the stories are bold, the conversations are real, and the insights come to you live, raw, and uncut. Every week, host Ty Cobb Backer sits down with game changers, trailblazers, and industry leaders who aren't afraid to tell it like it is. No filters, no scripts, just the truth. Please welcome your host of Behind the Tool Belt, Ty Cobb Backer.
Hey, with no further ado, we made it to 12:30. That's not too bad. Yeah. So thank you for those that have hung in there and waited, and that they know, Daniel, that the one time that we did actually start on time, people got pissed off. So don't.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Don't worry about any of that. But thank you for everybody for tuning in once again on these Wednesday editions of Behind the Tool Belt. Like I had mentioned earlier, we have another amazing guest that I've got to know recently. A couple weeks ago, we spent a week together in Cayman Island, and we did some gnarly shit while we were there and worked on ourselves and did all kinds of personal and professional development. But before we dive into that, I've been doing a piss poor job of promoting the thing that actually started Behind the Tool Belt, and that is the York Home and Garden Show that TC Backer will be performing at. The week of February 7th through the 9th, which is actually the weekend of Super Bowl Sunday, that Sunday. But I always, I think the past, 2 years, I've done a shitty job. And not that I've necessarily forgot where I come from, bum kind of thing, but I actually found the actual iPhone 8 that started all of the Behind the Tool Belt at a home show promoting one of our charitable events. We didn't know how to promote our charitable event. Somebody said, hey, do a Facebook Live. Ta-da, I'm Ty Backer with TC Backer Construction. Come on down to the York Home and Garden Show and bid on our auction items that our team has built. So once again, 5th year in a row, we've built all kinds of really nice stuff like planter boxes, gazebo type of trellis things with benches and flower pots and all that stuff. And we're going to fill this stuff up with mulch and topsoil. And there, as you can see, there is a, what do you call that? That's it's the thing that makes plants grow quicker and faster inside the freaking greenhouse. Yeah. Freaking greenhouse. Yeah. my went blank there. So our team actually built multiple pieces. This is just some of what you're going to see if you come down. We actually have free passes. So if you didn't want to actually attend the home show because you're not interested in a new kitchen, bathroom, roof, or anything like that, and you want to come down and actually purchase one of these, because this year we are not doing a silent auction. We've actually put a price tag on each one of these items. So if you want to come down, not have to pay to get into the home show, just come down and come to TC Backer, or just message me the weekend of that, and I will meet you outside and give you a free pass to get in. So that's that. I just wanted to make sure that we were plugging that, because typically years prior to last year and this year, because I've done such a piss poor job of promoting the home and garden show. And so everybody knows that every single dollar will be donated to a nonprofit organization called Workforce Now. Okay. That's the whole point of this. I failed to mention that, but the Workforce Now is a nonprofit organization that encourages students to get into the trades. And for those of you that know me and those that I'm close with, hold, the trades near and dear to our hearts. So let's not forget why we're doing this today, and how this thing got started. So get your butt down there, buy a piece. Every single dime will be donated to Workforce Now. So, all right, Daniel, is it Danny, Daniel?
It is 100% Daniel
okay.
For sure.
Okay. Yep. 100% Daniel.
Yeah. It's a pet peeve actually, of like the Danny's and all that. And to the point, like I'll purposely not respond to people. And I have people who absolutely are like, hey, Dan, hey, Dan. And I'm like, nope, not doing it. So,
okay. Now that I know that, that's not good.
Yeah. All good on my end.
Okay, good. So Daniel's son, my friend, the great Robosky. Let's dive right into, I kind of, Dan, you're the founder of Quantifi. You do Robosky, consulting, all these great, wonderful things. For those that are listening or soon to tune in on this, let's start with Quantifi. Like what is Quantifi?
At its core, it's a fractional COO company. So we have a lot of, like, you see a lot of fractional CFOs, CEOs. The operation side of the space is usually underutilized and overlooked a lot of times, just in that, especially in the home service side of the world, guys are really focused on like how to make that next dollar, and then selling their way through a lot of problems, and implementing processes and policies within their companies is something that they tend to do as an afterthought. So we started Quantifi to be more of a part-time element for a lot of these guys to be able to do those things without spending the money on a full-time COO a lot of times. So it's a cool experience. We get to step in and help companies identify sometimes where the problems actually lie, as opposed to where they think they lie, and help them build out, structure and process to overcome some of those obstacles and create efficiencies within their company. So it's easy answer. It's kind of a fractional COO company. We just do a lot of operational consulting for guys.
Nice. Now, does the consulting aspect complement Quantifi, or is that two separate things?
Those are two separate things. So Robosky Consulting by name is a little bit confusing, but it's a public adjusting firm. So I started in roofing back in 2014. Over the years, got tired of arguing with insurance companies, so I went and pulled my PA license. And right about the time they were really starting to implement the UPPA laws in different states that would prevent contractors from arguing policy items and things like that. So we started Robosky Consulting, honestly, because we started in Texas, and Texas has some weird name laws. So we tried 6 or 7 different names because we didn't want to have our last name be attached to it. And every time we submitted something, the state denied it. And so finally, we're just like, screw it, it'll be Robosky Consulting. And here we are. So that is primarily a public adjusting firm. We handle a few hundred claims a year across the country for different contractors and clients. And so they, in a weird way, they can complement each other, but we're very, very focused on not creating any sort of potential conflict between who may use us for operational things and then who may use us for PA work.
Yeah. So, okay. So over on the Quantified side, give me an example of something you would do when you came in to help consult a company.
So the first thing we do, we run a 2-day in person with every company that we onboard. And the reason that we do that is we want to physically see where they're working out of, and because a lot of guys don't have offices, a lot of guys are working out of a home office or whatever the case is, and sometimes that may be the issue that they're trying to overcome. But it's a lot harder for guys to graze over certain topics when you're sitting there in front of them, right? If you're on a phone call with them and you're like, well, how are you guys doing on, profit margins? They could be like, oh, I'm at 45. And then you don't get to see the facial expressions or the body language that goes along with that. And so we dive really heavily into the finance side of it, just from a profit margin, inefficient spending perspective. We look at if there is any sort of structural platform that they use regarding any sort of process, right? So what we find is that a lot of companies focus very, very heavily on the sales process side of things, because that's what makes them their money. It's all the back end processes that they struggle with. So I'll give an example. So like we went into one company and we found, from a lead closure perspective, they were closing like 18% of their leads, and they got, around 3,000 leads a year. And we can correlate that to a dollar amount, and that's usually where we end up having to go. But for them, it was like, if we could increase the efficiency of your guys closing these leads by 5%, that's another $500,000 in revenue for you guys. So we start to look at things like that. We try to find the most incremental changes that we can make that have the largest impact. And a lot of times it's getting past the owner's ego. It's a lot of times getting past their nervousness about scaling. And a lot of times they think they have a grasp on what the problem is, or the health of their company. And it takes an outside party who, I don't have an interest in sabotaging your company, right? The whole point of me coming in is to help you see something through a different lens. And so we try to find those things. And I can tell you 100% of the time we find something, right?
Mhm.
And because there's always the, hey, how do we validate your cost version of that conversation too? And usually we can find that pretty quickly. But the whole point for us is to create efficiencies where there is none. And the idea, we built Quantifi to be a feeder into these larger operating systems, right? So we have a designed exit from our firm. So at 12 months, you should be moving on. You should be moving on to an EOS and Empire, Clockwork, some of these larger operating systems, because we've built this to kind of be a precursor to those things. So we work with a lot of, small 2 and 3 man teams that do $2 to $8 million in the space, and they know they need to start delegating, they need to start having structure. And so we help work with them on a lot of those things.
Yeah, no, you said a lot of good things there. And the one thing that stuck with me a little bit is, ego and pride and things like that. And the one thing that I've learned along the way here is the more transparent I can be with, especially when it comes to a third party or somebody that can actually help me, or even a few selected people on my team, the more transparent that I can be with them, the further our growth goes and becomes. It's just like when we hired a financial controller. The more that I let them know, the quicker and the sooner I let them know about certain things that I thought were issues, and even certain things I didn't even know were issues, the sooner and the quicker that I was able to do that and let go of certain things and open up about them, the faster we were able to correct them and start to grow. But you also mentioned, profit margins and things like that. And I guess my question for you when it comes to that stuff, like when you come in and you look at the first thing, it's like, obviously their revenue is one thing. And then after that, their subcontractor comes out. And then after that, materials that they purchased and a few other little things, but that creates like a gross profit. So when you come in and you see that they're not at like a 40, 45 or 50% gross profit, like what are the things that you try to attack right away to make the business profitable?
Well, first I'll throw out that kind of nationally, anybody living 35 to 40, we consider acceptable, right? There are markets like where you guys live where the profit margins are generally higher, but we also have to look at whether we're talking insurance claim profit margins and retail profit margins, because those are vastly different. Again, very market specific, but we start to look at spending. We look at how they're calculating job costs. We start to look at where those inefficiencies are, and usually they're in one of 3 places. The first place is usually owner spending, because they're like, oh, I put myself on a salary of X, but then you start to look at their spending, which is why we like to look at their P&L, is they're spending 50, 60 grand extra a year on things that the company's buying, but it's really not for the company, right? And they tend to overlook those things. Those are usually pretty glaring examples, but a lot of times, and probably the most prominent version of that, is we see inefficient takeoff when it comes to job material ordering, crew scheduling, things like that, that we can start to dial in a process of like, okay, well, who's checking this item? Like, is the sales guy, project manager going out and doing the takeoff? And if he's doing it, is he doing it appropriately? Are we missing materials? Is this causing, the jobs to be a 3-day job instead of a 2-day job? And then what does that do for the efficacy of crews and then our revenue? And then how does it affect AR? And you start to go down those roads, and that's where most people will stop, because then now there's too many variables and they just kind of put their hands up and go, you know what, I can live with this certain amount of pain that we're dealing with. That's usually where we find it, is the mismanagement of the job. And nobody from a client perspective has ever come into our conversation going, we're messing up this. It's usually, well, our guys just need to sell more. And there's never wrong, but it's usually not entirely the right answer. The third thing that we see is we find that a lot of guys take advice from groups that they don't read the room very well. So usually when you step into these kind of Facebook forums and group chats and all this junk, the guys who are saying the most are usually not the ones that you want to follow a lot of times, right? I saw one the other day where one of my clients jumped into a group chat and was like, hey, these guys are trying to, take a portion of my business and da da da. And it was like, you're going to get a version of that response based on how you present it to everybody. And that wasn't entirely the whole truth of what was going on. But the version that he got in response was all these business owners going, yeah, screw that. Tell those guys to kick rocks. You can fight. Like, if they're not willing to just be part of the team, tell them to go home. And, there's always, you're always fighting against the whatever version of advice that they've gotten from anybody else in the industry. And it's like, well, you're paying me, right? So I have an interest in making sure that I'm giving you good advice and steering you in the right direction. The guy on Facebook who's sitting there commenting on your post doesn't really have a vested interest in your business, and he's just arbitrarily throwing information out there. You can take it for what you want, but I'm just saying, if I'm paying somebody for their advice, I'm going to take their advice.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way that I look at it anyway. So
yeah, no, great response to that question. Cause that, a lot of people, and this is the thing, a lot of people don't know how to figure out, the difference between gross and net, let alone, and the most difficult part, at least for me over the years, was trying to quantify, no pun intended, my overhead, like where and how much is my overhead. But most importantly, I think the thing that we've discovered here is if I'm bidding jobs and we're not making a 35% net profit on something, that correlates to the gross profit of the company. You know what I'm saying? So if we're consistently bidding stuff and we're only making 19%, because a lot of people, I don't think they even understand the difference between gross and net on a P&L. Now, the gross profit on each particular job, and if you're at 19%, that's gonna correlate into your gross profit, and then that only leaves you 19% to work with for the cost of doing business. That's fuel, that's insurances, that's payroll, that's everything, the cable bill, the Wi-Fi, your computers, and all that stuff there. And I think it's pretty cool that that you do something like this, but on more of a personal note and question, I'm going to kind of shift the conversation here a little bit, to more of like personal development and professional development and things like that. But what do you think sets you on the path of starting to help people in businesses, right? Because I know you, I know you enough, and I've heard overheard some conversation. I knew you were in the military and a couple other things. And I want to go down that rabbit hole a little bit later, but what do you think sets you on this journey of wanting to help people in businesses?
So I've always been that personality type of wanting to help people regardless, right? It's kind of been this stamp of like everywhere you go. And I teach my kids this. It's like, you always want to leave a scenario better than you left it. You always want to be able to walk away from a situation or a relationship looking at it and saying, well, I've left a positive impact here. I've done something positive. You don't ever want the adverse side of that, right? And so that's kind of just always who I've been. And then obviously going into the military and doing all that, like, kind of compounds that. As far as on the business side of things, I think just very similar to a lot of other people in this industry, you get screwed over a handful of times by people that you trust or that you've worked with. And you're kind of faced with that choice of, do I kind of harden the exterior and kind of just be very self-serving and worry only about my own success and productivity? Or do you say, I'm going to make sure that I'm not the catalyst to some of those people affecting other people? And then how do you do that in a positive manner? So I've always kind of just leaned into the karma will find its way to deal with the people who screw other people over and do adverse things to folks. I'm just always going to do what I need to do to be on the right side of right. And with that, I got really good at working myself out of companies. So the last probably 4 or 5 companies that I've worked for kind of W-2 full time, we always hit one of 2 thresholds of either they have a ceiling and we can't move past that, and we've built everything that we need to build internally, and then they're spending money on me for no further growth because they've kind of put on their own ceiling on things. Alternatively, we get to a point where we're starting to butt heads because as a good COO or a good operations director or whatever title you want to put on it, there should be an expectation of reputation and authority within your company. Like if I become the COO of TC Backer tomorrow, there should be an expectation that I have a certain authority in there. And it's not a challenge of your authority, but it's an implementation of somebody new who has a very specific role. Egos get in people's way. And the amount of CEOs that I've butted heads with over the years where they're just like, I've literally had one say, if number 2 has more authority than number 1, then we need to rethink this whole scenario. And I was like, if you see it that way, then I'll just go. We're not going to overcome this. And so knowing that one of those 2 scenarios tends to happen is how I just kind of got into the fractional side of things, which actually I like better because I get to jump in, I get to leave an impact on a company and help them grow. And there's usually a tangible result there. We can see it. We chart everything out and we can look at trajectories and all that cool, graphs and pie charts and all that junk. I get the self-satisfaction of being able to do that now with 20 to 30 companies at the same time, as opposed to 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I like how you kind of fell into, it sounds like you kind of fell into Quantifi because of your past experiences and stuff like that. But do you think because of your past experiences, like jobs, your upbringing, good experiences, bad experiences, personal tragedies, personal wins, made you who you are today and do what it is that you do?
I think so. Yeah. And you and I, obviously we've interacted in a handful of different times. We haven't really got to know each other very well, except for the last few weeks. And one of the things that you'll figure out about me is that I don't ever get worked up about anything. I am constantly calm, and that's a byproduct of my past. Right. One of the companies I work for, they went and got a shirt that said steady 6 on it because they said on a scale of 1 to 10, you're always at a 6. Like there's never an upkick or a downfall. And that is absolutely a byproduct of trauma, if that's what you want to look at it. Because, you deal with a lot of the things that, especially a lot of combat veterans dealt with, and myself included, like some of these things don't seem so stressful anymore, right? Some of the problems that people put a ton of weight to in their day-to-day life don't seem that intense anymore, right? And so, but what that allows is it allows for a little bit clearer picture when it comes to problem solving and looking at things through a different lens and trying to be creative in some of those things. But it's absolutely a byproduct of upbringing and past, right? My mom's from Detroit, my dad was from Chicago. Like they had very hard lives growing up, and we grew up on welfare and government cheese and food stamps and all that junk, and you learn to value things a little bit differently. And so when you have the opportunity to step out and add value to somebody's life and it doesn't cost them anything, and at least in its inception, right, like you want to try and do that. So yeah, I think it's a combination of just adding all those things together and now trying to instill that in my kids is a whole different battle. But
Yeah. Right. No, that's a whole other topic too, is trying to
yeah.
lead by example and not sped out. And,
Mhm.
I think one of the things that has helped me, and I'm a knucklehead. The only way that I learn anything is by doing it my way.
Mhm.
And it's never a good idea until I think it's a good idea. But I had this one situation where I was able to see myself in somebody else, and like their behavior uh, looked like me. I was like, oh my God, I actually look like that. I sound like that. I
Right.
behave like that. And until that moment, and I realized, I don't want to look like that person, especially in public or to my
Mhm.
peers, my coworkers, or co-leaders. But for me, it took that, seeing somebody else treat actually my significant other, my wife Jana, poorly. There was two lessons there. They treated my wife poorly, and I didn't like how they responded to their reaction to the situation. Just reminded me of me, and it wasn't like they hit her or did anything like that. It was
Right.
just like, it should have been more of a I agree to disagree kind of conversation, but it really wasn't.
Mhm.
They kind of blew their top. And then, of course, I blew my top. So I made the situation even worse. So twofold, I saw
Right.
myself, but then I acted like myself by grabbing a hold of this person and made that situation worse. And I was the one that almost caught the charges and had to go to the courthouse, and they had an attorney and all this crap. Charges were dropped, long story short, but it's because of trials, tribulations, bad behaviors, and all kinds of different things that I've had to go through, and the transparency thing, and letting go and letting somebody else
Mhm.
come in and do the job for me sometimes, where, at some point in time, I'm sure I'm going to have to step down and I consider myself the CEO, but in my email signatures, I'm actually the chief energy officer. And really today, that's all I bring to the team is I bring the heat, I bring the energy, I bring
Mhm.
the charge. Right. And Glenn, who's my general manager up here, which should have a better he should have a better job title, but I call him general manager because there's not much that guy does not manage, right, on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis. It could be production, it could be operations, and he does so many things throughout the course of the day. Holds meetings, reprimands people,
Right.
awards people that I completely have no idea that it's going on, and that's a hard transition and a hard pill, I think, for a lot of us entrepreneurs who think that we've built this. This is my baby. I've done this all by myself. And the sad reality is I couldn't have did this without all the help and the great people that I've actually
Right.
surrounded myself around. And that I've discovered too, is that I'm the only one that can screw this thing up. Like I'm sure you felt with the other entrepreneurs that you may have went to work for,
Mhm.
that they're the ones that kind of screwed it up. But then we also sometimes have to eat humble pie and be like, look, we both played a part in this.
Mhm.
And that's kind of why entrepreneurship begins. That's where the journey begins, because it's kind of like, I just can't work for other people. I
Right.
love pouring into other people, and I can't do it here because I feel like I'm being held back. So I have a question for you, another personal question. When do you think you identified that you were good at helping people?
The day I got out of the army
Okay.
was the first time I think I verbalized it. Right. I had always, because not to dive too far down on the military stuff, but I did 3 tours in Iraq and 1 year in Afghanistan, and at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of people who had done 4 deployments. And then nowadays, you got guys that do 6, 7, 8 because they stayed in longer than I did. But you don't really talk about it, right? You're always playing the kind of patsy game with your relatives or your friends, where they have it's the same 3 or 4 questions from everybody, right? It's like, did you kill anybody? Did you see dead bodies? Was it hot over there? Like, and it's a weird collection of questions, honestly, but you play that game and you move on. And that's essentially it. And the humility that comes with some of that is challenging sometimes. And the day I got out of the army, the last thing that you do is you walk into the deer's office and you hand in your ID card, and they basically tell you have a great day, which is why Daniel's such a big deal to me, right? So I walked in there and I handed the lady my ID card, and she said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Sergeant Robosky." And she's like, "No, no, no, not anymore. What's your name? And I said, well, my name's Daniel. She goes, is it Dan or Danny? And I said, no, my name's Daniel. It's on my driver's license. And she said, all right, Daniel, you have a great day. Thank you for your service. And I was like, is that it? And she's like, yep. And so I walked out, and my wife was sitting in the car, and I got in the passenger seat, and she said, are you going to be okay? And I said, I sat there and I thought for a second, and I said, I think so. I said, I think I can find enough solace in the idea that I've left a positive impact on enough people. And I feel like I've done enough for my country that nobody can look back at the last 11 years of my life and be like, what have you done? Right. And I was okay with that for a period of time, and then I was not okay with it anymore, and I had to refine some of those things where, and I think that's really what started the trajectory for me. Was like, you lose a lot of yourself when you leave the military, because my whole life, I was 17 when I joined, so 17 to 28, that's all I knew, right? And so all of a sudden I'm kicked out into the real world as an adult, going, what do I do? Like, where do I gotta go find a job? I've never applied for a job before. Like, what does this look for? And you lose a lot of yourself in that. And I found that the path forward for me, like my own version of medicine, was if I'm doing good by somebody, I have that, right? Like I'm still a person who is positively impacting other people. And to your point earlier, you were talking about seeing yourself in that this version where you're like, I don't like that person. I've had that as well. And when Amy and I was dating, I was still in, and she was talking about all the combat time that I had had. And I just told her, I said, I don't ever want to walk into a room and people see me walk in and go, oh shit, that dude's been through some stuff. Right. Like, and I'm confident that I've spent so much of my life navigating that space that when I walk into a room, nobody says that, because I don't want them to. Right. I could absolutely walk into a space and have that, that 1,000-yard stare and the just general, been through some stuff look. And I don't want the sympathy. I don't care to have the attention now. I used to hate it, but I feel like I've helped a lot of people through their own traumas by being there and opening up about my shit. And it helps. Right. And so I think for me, the day I got out was the first time I ever actually like put thought into it and said, this is a path that I think I'm just going to get stuck on. And I was hit or miss on it for a long time. And then in December of 2022, I had a buddy of mine pass away from complications from being deployed and whatever. And the first person that got called was me. And I struggled with that one a lot. And my wife looked at me and she said, you either need to step in or step out. She's like, you need to be headfirst into this, and you need to be an advocate, and you need to help people wherever you can, or you need to pull yourself so far out of this that they don't call you anymore. And I couldn't pull myself out of it. So here we go. This is what we're doing. So I've just been kind of on that path, and it works. And I feel good about it when I run into people and I see them 6 months later and they're like, hey man, that thing that you said, blah, 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 or hey, that advice that you gave me changed everything, whatever it is, as long as it's positive, I'm cool with it. I know that I'm the asshole in somebody's story, right? We all are, but
Yep.
I can minimize those.
Yeah. Well, how did you get yourself out of that? I mean, I know I heard you say that, you started pouring into people and where you could be of service to people, but when those moments that, you're alone, or those nights that you can't sleep and everybody in the house is sleeping and stuff, like, how did you get through some of that stuff that you may have experienced over in Iraq, and then coming back and having a wife and dealing with that, and dealing with yourself and trying
Mhm.
to enter and be a productive citizen of society? Like, how did you overcome that and get where you're at today?
So I actually said this, a version of this when we were down in the Caymans, and Eric came and talked to me afterwards. He's like, I get what you're saying, but you might want to think of the way that you deliver that statement. So I'll kind of see if I can change it around and you might recall it. But uh, I had to come to terms with where my idol was, right? So there's always that like forced reliving of moments where you're like, I'm purposely kind of putting myself through this pain again because I need to remember. I don't want to forget certain things, but then in the same breath, you can't live there, and so you have to kind of find a way to navigate your day-to-day space. For me, it has been that like I'm just generally uh desensitized to a lot of things. I think when we were in the Caymans, I was like, I'm just sad all the time. And
Mhm.
but I'm sad for a reason, right? I'm not sad like woe is me. I'm sad because of the shit that I've been through in my life, and I refuse to let it go. So I've accepted that, like, my version of sad is just where I live, and that's okay. And that's kind of what Eric was giving me shit about. He's like, you make it sound like it's just okay to be depressed all the time. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not what I'm saying. And so I understood kind of where he was coming from, but that's how I got through it. Is I sit out and I suffer through those things on my own, because while there is a certain reliance on my spouse, and my wife is amazing, and I couldn't have been more blessed in finding her in my life, because she came in after all of my deployments. And so she went through a lot of she got all the after effects without having to go through the stuff, right? And it was really hard for her sometimes, because on one hand she's like, I want you to tell me these things, and I'm like, I don't want to tell anybody this stuff. Like, I've gone through stuff that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I don't want to relive it
Mhm.
openly. I'll relive it in my head all the time, but I don't want to talk about it. And so for me, it was, I've been able to reduce a lot of that angst and stuff like that by way of helping other people. It's almost like I'm paying my own penance, right?
Right.
Um, to whoever, it's like I'm self-imposing that. Um,
Mhm.
but I feel good about it, right? And I think that was where I missed the mark a little bit when we were down talking to Eric. Was like, I made it sound like you could just live in this depressive state all the time and it's okay. It's like, no, it's just figuring out where your idol is. And for some people, that idol's at an 8 or a 9 all the time, and they're just running, right? They're just constantly, they're filling everybody's cup around them, and they're just going and going and going. That's not me. Mine's relatively low. And but you have to talk to people too, right? Like, you have to talk to people about the shit that you're going through, because while they may not understand it, empathy is a powerful, powerful thing.
Yeah, amen to that for sure. Being empathetic to other people, and understanding that they have gone through some stuff, but it's this is a great topic. Things that we've gone through, whether
Mhm,
it be children or young adults that have
mhm.
molded us into who and what we are, and why we do what we do today. And I know we all have some war stories of childhood traumas and things like that. My parents weren't perfect, and I talk about this all the time, where I had the opportunity. My wife and I don't want to forget, mentioning Jana, because Jana, three quarters, at least 90% of the time, took care of my mom up until
Mhm.
the day that she passed. But I was in a position, I was in a season of my life where financially, not necessarily mentally, but financially was able to move my mom in and take care of her. And one of the ways that I dealt with that grieving process was that my mom was very caring and giving, and was involved with so many different things. And some of the viewers that I see on here watching right now have heard this story 100 times, but it's true. It's the God's honest truth. How I dealt with that is the day that the hearse came and picked my mother up. Um, they pulled her out. I jumped in my truck. I went down to the office, and up until recently, I actually lifted my head up, because at that point in time, I put my head down and I just dove into work. I grew
Mhm.
the businesses that I was involved with at that time. But the one thing that I swear to God that I was going to do is that I was going to fill her shoes. I was going to pick the torch up, and I was going to carry her legacy as
Right.
far as I could probably do, even if it killed me. I was going to carry her legacy. And what I mean by that is the things that she was involved with: the DARE program, the Exchange Club, the Chamber of Commerce, Summer Jubilee, Santa's Breakfast, all of these things that she would just, be a part of all these clubs. But she was more of the outreach and the committee. She was a part of the committees of helping the less fortunate and feeding
Mhm.
the less fortunate, clothing the less fortunate and stuff. And I swore to myself that I was going to be my mother's greatest accomplishment, no matter what. If her looking down at me, and I just want her to be so proud. And a lot of people can't say that about their parents. They might not have liked their parents, but I've
Right.
accepted a lot of things that my parents didn't do right, and I just knew that they did the best that they could. And I don't know if that's just because I can't live with resentment um today, and I don't want to live with resentment. I don't always have to
Right.
be right either. It's like I would rather be loved than be right, and love. than it was, because I used to live life wanting to be right so much that it literally was spiritually killing me inside. But through all of those experiences that I've put myself through, and some of those things that I had no control over, have molded me into being the person that I am, and has helped me and motivate me to want to help people and other businesses and things. And that's kind of why I was going down this rabbit hole, because I really wanted to hear that from you, because what I'm picking up from the few times that we have had conversations, and some of the conversations I've overheard you having with some of the men while we were in Cayman, I felt like, Daniel's a good dude. And I guess my question for you, after listening to what you were saying, and this whole, you're 6, and the, not depression, but the sad, like you're sad. Is this something that like you are working on, or is it something that you've accepted? Like, okay, I'm a 6, I'm sad, and I'm okay with that. Or is there something you've been doing to help yourself not be sad anymore?
So I think I look at it from an interesting perspective, in the sense that if I said that I was a 6 and I was happy, nobody would bat an eye, right? If I said
Mhm,
I was a 6 and I'm okay, nobody would bat an eye. But because I use the word sad, I think
mhm,
it brings a certain, wait, why? Why are you sad?
mhm,
And the fact of the matter is that, eh, people's trauma is people's trauma, right? And mine's no heavier or lighter than yours and how you want to handle it, or anybody else. And mine is not, I wasn't abused as a kid. I didn't, my parents had a tough life and they did what they could for us. And, I don't have like that I had a really shitty childhood story. 'Cause I don't. Um, my trauma didn't start until 2003. Right. And, um, those events are sad. Right.
mhm,
And that's okay. I've been divorced twice because different reasons, right? And those are sad. But I want to know that when my day comes and I'm put in the earth, that my kids and anybody who decides to show up at my funeral can be like, man, every time I needed that dude, he's here.
mhm,
Every time I needed advice, he at least had an opinion that was helpful, or he was there for me, and like reached out to me when nobody else did. Like, I want to be that person. That's the person that I feel like I was put on this earth to do. Um, it just so happens that the emotion that keeps me balanced is sad, and that's just where I live. For me, it's not a matter of going, I need to fix this, I need to work on this. I have a ton of mental and emotional things that I need to work on, but my general idol, when I start the car in the morning while it's warming up, that's fine with me. And I think that's hard for people to wrap their head around, because the emotion that's attached to it is sadness. If it was anything else, nobody would even bat an eye, right?
mhm,
Um, because if somebody's just generally happy and they're bebopping through life, everybody's like, that guy's got it figured out. Well, so do I. It's just my version of it, right? And I think that's something that, my youngest is autistic, and emotions are a big conversation for us in the house all the time. And anybody who's been around a kid with autism, they have big emotions and they don't know how to handle them sometimes. And the conversation that I have consistently with my youngest is, look, buddy, you can have that emotion. Nobody, don't ever let anybody tell you not to have the emotion, but you have to be able to navigate it, right? And he doesn't know the stuff that I went through, and I would kind of keep it that way. But I feel like I would be a hypocrite in telling him that it's okay to have these emotions and you have to navigate them and do all that, if I wasn't doing the same thing. And I do. I practice that every single day, and I'm okay, because prior to those words coming out of my mouth, anybody who's ran into me at a convention or in public or on a job site or whatever would never be like, man, Daniel must be sad all the time. Right. That's just it. That's all internal. That's all where my head's at. So, I think it's always interesting to see people's reaction to that statement, because they kind of correlate sadness to some sort of negativity. I'm cool with it. I live there. That's where my head is always at. But what it's done is it's made me appreciate the times that I'm like happy, that the good memories, because part of this too is, and maybe there's maybe a contextual issue here. So I have 3 traumatic brain injuries. I have short-term memory issues, and for a long time, uh, Amy would be like, "Hey, do you remember when we went and did this?" And I'm like, Nope. And I wish I did. And I felt like an asshole because I couldn't share in that memory that she was like, this is a thing in our marriage that was happy and we enjoyed. And so I've overcome that where I can by putting more weight into those things that are happy, those things that are good memories, and those moments where I'm proud of my kids and I can outwardly show them that. My wife's got the screensaver on her phone is a picture of Cooper jumping in my arms after a soccer game because he plays goalie, and he struggled for years of not overcoming the emotion or having goals scored on him, and it was this huge thing. And we started this thing where every game I tell him we have 5 things, and what are the 5 things? And one of them is being a good teammate, being a leader, recovering, being big, and being fast, right? And so he knows if I'm yelling numbers to him from the side of the field, he knows what I'm talking about. And number 3 is recover, and it's always that. And it's not physically recover like getting in your position; it's mentally recover because something adverse happened to you. And he went through this whole game and he had like 17 saves, and it was amazing. And the whole time I'm jumping up and down the sidelines, and the game was over. And he came crying off the field and just jumped, and I grabbed him, and somebody got a picture of it, and Amy wasn't there. And I sent the picture to her, and she started crying. And it was like, this is an emotion. Like, these are what emotions look like. And they're larger because you live at a lower idle all the time. Right. And it's just it's just my own specific thing that works. And I'm not saying that it would work for everybody, but I think one of the hardest things that our culture as a society as a whole has struggles with right now is being okay having an emotion and not impacting other people by it.
Wow. Wow. Amazing story, Daniel. That was that's what this podcast is all about, man. Like behind the tool belt, the man behind the camera, the man or woman behind the tool belt. That was good, man. And resiliency, right? Recover. Resiliency, I think, is something that hasn't become a buzzword yet, but probably will be after we're going to have this conversation right now, because that plays into so many facets and areas professionally, personally, is to be able to bounce back and not let that bad shot ruin your entire 18 holes, or one bad thing on a Monday ruined my entire week. And personally, a part of my personal development journey has been recovering quickly, moving on, learning from it, and saying to myself, why is this happening for me and not to me right now? And personal development and professional development. Like, I guess I'll have a question in this for you someplace. What do you think is most important? Okay. Do you think it's personal development or professional development, or is there no difference?
Oh, there's a massive, massive difference, right? I correlate professional development into the just constant learning of your craft, right? So whatever it is, if you're an entrepreneur, you obviously know that you're going to have a variety of different tools that you're going to use all the time, but there's that constant learning new things. And being an ops person, there's always some new version of an old tactic that's always there, but you need to learn it. So you're developing professionally. The personal development side, I don't think that you can grow into a successful business owner and a leader without being sound yourself, right? Like, again, if you're off balance and you're an addict, or because that's a big thing in our industry, right? It's like a lot of guys who are running businesses are recovering alcoholics or recovering prescription drugs or hard drugs or whatever. And for somebody like me, it's adrenaline, right? I was addicted to adrenaline for a long time because of the austere situations that I had found myself in. I never had a problem with drugs or alcohol, but you still have to overcome that in some capacity. And until you are self-aware enough to recognize that you're always refining your own edges, you're not going to be a capable, effective leader for the people that you want to have in your ecosystem and in your life and in your business. With that being said, the biggest thing that I have recognized is that the version that you have of yourself is very rarely the version that other people have of you. And there's very rarely 2 people who see the same version of you, right? And we are usually beating up the version of ourselves that we see in the mirror, not the person that's a public facing. But you only get that sort of self-awareness by going through down the personal development road. You have to be doing things to make yourself better, because if not, you're gonna be stagnant. So to me, they're very vastly different things. One is very tangible. You can see a result from it in your business and how you run things, and you're maneuvering the cogs, right, to make something more efficient. But on the profession or the personal side, a lot of that stuff's very internal, and sometimes the rest of the world doesn't see it, but sometimes they don't need to see it, right? And overcoming some of that, because I think there's always this like want to be like, look what I did. I've never been I need the recognition for things, but sometimes it's like, man, I did this. Like, did anybody notice? Can anybody tell me, hey, attaboy, pat me on the back, tell me good job, right? I don't want you to, but I want you to want to do it, right? Like, it's the whole, like, just show me that you acknowledge that I'm doing something in the right direction for my own self. But I also think a lot of people are in really toxic relationships with their spouses and things like that, where if they spend any of that time on the personal development side of things, the toxic people in their life are constantly like beating them up, like, well, why, what about me, how does this benefit me? And it's like, not everything is about you, and if I'm not the best version of myself, I can't be a good version for you. So
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. This is a good topic because there are some things, personal development, for me definitely translates in a lot of areas of my professional life, but it really starts with personal development. And I like how you said, being in a toxic relationship, and unfortunately, a lot of us stay in those because it's just easier, not because it's going to be the best thing for us. And that could be in a work relationship, that can be in a
mhm,
personal relationship, and that's a completely different podcast there. But for me, I think development in general, whether it's professional development or personal development, it really starts personally, because if I'm dealing with things, working on things rather, on how I handle situations. Like, am I the person that's going to freak out over, my 23-year-old wrecking the car is probably going to translate how I react to certain things at work,
mhm,
right? Whether it be big or small. So for me, over the years, when I began this personal development journey, it was one of those things of just that was one of the biggest things, was how I reacted to certain things that would happen, whether it was personally or, and it really started in my personal life, like especially when my, to talk about my mom again, of dealing with, the bad things that were going on at home at that time, and not taking that stuff to work. So learning how to know when to deal with those things, right? So I'm not wearing this on my face all day, every
right,
day, and making poor decisions because I can't think straight, because all I can think about how my mom is passing, dying in her bed today.
mhm,
So I think for me, it starts at home. What am I doing? Am I eating right? Am I sleeping right? Am I exercising right? And this for me is like arming myself. So when I do leave the house in the morning and I'm reading and doing all of these things, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm attending, events like the one that we got to experience a couple weeks ago and stuff like that. And then when I come home, I just feel so much more centered, and I
mhm.
feel like I can deal with things better, especially pushing ourselves, scuba diving, was that your first time scuba diving?
It wasn't my first. It was first time going to those depths, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So, okay. So you pushed yourself to those depths, and same
Mhm.
with me, jumped in that thing. So there's not much right now going on in my life that's going to be much worse than that. So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
in order for me to handle all of these smaller things, I have to continuously push myself outside of my comfort zone, literally preparing myself for bad shit to happen.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people are like, why would you want to put yourself through that when you can just sit on the house and collect Cheeto dust in your belly button all day? And it's like, that's just not how I want to live today. I want to continuously expand my mind, educate myself, because if I'm not continuously doing those things, what good am I to my family? And this is where the
Mhm.
selfish part comes in when you're in those toxic relationships, because it is at the end of the day, if I'm not eating, I can't feed others. So I need to continuously feed my brain, feed my belly good,
Mhm.
healthy things. I need to continuously work out and do these things, because if I'm not doing these things, then I'm actually, that's the selfish part of it. If I'm not taking care of myself to be around for my grandchildren and watch them graduate from college, that's a selfish in itself, a selfishness in itself of not me not taking care of myself, or continuously to smoke cigarettes, or all of these other bad
Mhm.
habits that I used to have that I no longer have today. Wasn't just for me necessarily. It was, yes, it was me taking care of me, but it's so I'm here 20 or 30 years from now.
Mhm. I went through a similar thing. So as far as like addiction and things like that go, the only thing I've ever been addicted to was cigarettes, and I smoked for 20 some odd years. And I actually, when I had lost all the weight, I had went in and I had a tummy tuck done. I got all the extra skin cut off, and the doctor messed it up, and I ended up spending 2 weeks in the heart unit. Well, so I went 3 weeks without a cigarette. And so I came out of the hospital, and my normal go-to would have, no matter what I was doing, would have immediately been, let's go to the gas station, grab a pack of cigarettes. And I just said, you know what, I'm gonna try to not do it this time. And I haven't had a cigarette in almost 2 years now.
Mhm.
And you look back at those things and you're like, I recognized immediately that now I'm not so out of breath when my kids want to play, or if I have to go. Cooper and I started running in the mornings, and I just because like he enjoys it. He hates getting up to do it, but he enjoys the time because we get to have conversations about, puberty and girls and all the stuff that he wants to talk about. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was still smoking 2 packs a day, because I wouldn't have been able to breathe enough to do it. So you start to figure out that if the more you do take care of yourself, and it does seem counterintuitive, right? Because as a man, as a husband, as a father, you're always in this, I want to provide and give the best version of life to the people around me. But if you're not healthy and you're not taking care of yourself, you may get to do that for a minute, but it's a blip on the radar at some point where you can kind of forecast, hey, I'm not gonna be able to do this anymore. It's the same thing like when I was when I was fat, like I was 315 pounds. I couldn't go do anything with my kids. My back hurt, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt. I was breathing hard all the time. It was just, nothing healthy. And the boys would have their friends, parents going out, and they're going hiking and they're going kayaking and they're doing all this shit. I'm like, that looks fun. Not me, and you realize that the more you start to put effort into yourself, um, the better the result is for the people around you. While you could still be good and unhealthy, you get to be a lot better when you have your shit together.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's a lot of work taking care of yourself so you can take care of others.
Mhm.
Really, at the end of the day, that's what it is that we're doing, and if I wouldn't have gone on this, physical fitness journey, I wouldn't
Mhm.
be able to, hang out as long as I could at, at a trade show. I wouldn't be able to stand
Right.
on a trade show floor for, 10 or 12 hours, or
Mhm.
have the stamina to put in the hours that I put in to provide for myself and other families, and all of those things that translate into, yes, I'm putting the work in the gym so I can work longer hours, so I can live a healthier life, so I can think more
Mhm.
clearer by exhilarating myself so I can think clearer, right? Like, and that's that
Yep.
thing where you just gotta, push yourself to where nobody else can push yourself. And this is the thing where it's like, you have to hold yourself accountable and have good habits that aren't easily developed but
Mhm.
happen over time. And it's about delayed gratification. And anybody that's watching this thing, it's like, just because you went to the gym last week, and you go once or twice a month and you're not seeing the results, unfortunately, that's just not how it works. You got
Right.
to stay consistent, figure out what it is that you got to work. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you earlier was like, how does somebody identify what it is that they need to personally work on? And I guess to answer the question that I may have had for you, I'm going to answer it, you know, is and for me, and this is for me, and you can still answer that question, but it's like, you were 315 pounds. You're like, obviously that's an issue. So what can I do? Whether get on a treadmill, have some medical procedures
Mhm.
done, all of the things that, but you did it. And but so that's one thing, but staying consistent with what it is that you're doing today so you don't become 315 pounds again. Like,
Right.
let's talk about that journey a little bit of like, okay, what was the paradigm shift for you? Was it because you couldn't hang out with your kids? Was it because you were running out of breath? Besides that, what made you want to make that switch to just live a healthier life?
So I had a mixed bag of situations in that. But so first I had a big hole in my esophagus from the water in Iraq being over chlorinated and over chemicalized so we could drink it, right? And because they're pulling water out of the Euphrates River, which is like one of the nastiest rivers in the world, and it eroded this massive hole in my esophagus. So I had to have a procedure called a Nissen fundoplication done. So basically, they cut your esophagus off of your stomach, get rid of all the bad, and then reattach it. Basically, at that point, the stomach acid can't go anywhere and whatever. So I had that done in that'd have been 2014, I think. And I blew up after that. I got really, really big after that. And it's like the fat bastard from Austin Powers, right? Like I eat because I'm depressed because I eat. Like it was just that constant cycle all the time. And you'd work out consistently for a month and you'd lose 5 to 7 pounds and then you'd gain 10 pounds back. And, you just kind of go through and we tried every diet known to man. And then the Nissen actually started to fail. And the next step from a Nissen failing is a gastric bypass. So they're like, if it's not going to work, then we're going to do a whole bypass. So I was kind of in this position where it was like, so you're going to fix my esophagus and I'm going to lose a whole bunch of weight doing this. Like I should have done this years ago. Like we should have just skipped that step and done this right away. And so when I had that done, it was kind of this immediate, like you have to do a pre-op diet so you can actually have the surgery. But to your point a minute ago about maintaining that consistency afterwards is, I've had when you're in that community, it's kind of this weird community where like there's Facebook groups of people who have all had bypasses or sleeves or whatever, and they document their weight loss journey and whatever. And we have some friends that did theirs and, have gained all the weight plus some back because they treated the bypass as this like magic solution to their problem. While it is, you still have to be consistent. And like, I don't drink anything carbonated. I try to consume less than like 30 grams of sugar a day, and I avoid bread as much as I can. But sometimes, you're out in restaurants or whatever, and you don't really you end up getting some with bread in it, whatever. But for the most part, I avoid all that stuff like the plague. And that's why I've been able to keep the weight off for multiple years, where we have friends that lost a ton and immediately gained it back because they immediately went back to drinking beer. Or we had one friend who went back to drinking red wine because she's like, well, it's not carbonated. It's like, it's all sugar. Like your body's retaining that. And so what I learned from that was that the diet that works, get rid of things that are bubbly, reduce your sugar, don't eat bread. Like if you could just do those 3 things, you'll lose a ton of weight. But I actually got down so low that my doctor was like, we're putting you on a cycle of steroids to put weight back on you. Because I got down to 164 and I'm 5'10", and I looked like a cancer patient. And so he's like, hey, we're going to put you on a cycle of steroids. I need you to work out every day for 8 weeks. And I was like, okay. And we did that. And we got up to like 205. And I sit between 205 and 215 all the time now. And I feel good here. But I work out at least 3 times a week and I eat relatively healthy and I'm active. I don't sit all day long like I used to. And you have to create those consistencies in your life or you're just going to fall right back into the same thing. So, I think that's why dieting is such a struggle for people, is because they see that immediate loss of a few pounds because their body's in shock, and then they fall off the wagon and they put more pounds back on, and it becomes this weird cycle. But the same thing exists for addiction, right? Like there are plenty of days I'd love to have a cigarette, but I know as soon as I have one, I'm going to have 2 and I'm going to have a pack and then I'm going to be stuck there for the next 20 years, so I just don't do it. But I see guys all the time that toe that line where they're like, oh, I only have a cigarette when I'm drinking. And it's like, okay, how often are you drinking? But I think you have to create those consistencies, and habits are not something that happen immediately, right? They're formed over time. And honestly, I wish I had better habits. I wish that I was more consistent in my working out. I wish I was more consistent in some of these things. And all you can do is work on them. So,
yeah. And it's never too late. It's never too late. And it has to start somewhere. Anytime I start slacking off, and it doesn't matter what time of day or how much I ate that day, I say to myself, it can happen now. Right. And I tend to fast. I'll do intermittent fasting. And that seems to work really. for me, especially coming up on, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I'm 50 years old. So it's hard for me, kick in my metabolism, especially if I'm eating Cheetos laying in bed at night. And that, I know for me, that is a metabolism killer, and so we've kind of removed those things. Like I don't have I like Swedish fish. I like Twizzlers. I
Mhm.
like all that stuff. And I had a whole drawer next to my bed. And one night I ate like a half a bag of Twizzlers. And I was like, you know what? I just picked them up. And this was about a month or two or maybe 3 ago. And I'm in a comfortable weight, but I know what it's going to do to me. Like I
Mhm.
started to slip again. And God bless Jana. She knows I love that shit. So when she's at the grocery store, she'll pick this stuff up. I picked it all out of the drawer and I went out to the trash can and I threw it in the trash can. And this was probably 10:30 at night, but that's where it started for me. Again,
Right. Yeah.
10:30 at night. I don't have to wait till, tomorrow night. I don't have to wait till 7 a.m. in the morning. It's like, if you make that conscious decision, it can happen at midnight. It can happen at 1:30 in the afternoon. It doesn't matter, and like you said, I loved how you said, like, cut out the carbs, cut out the sugar, sodas, Red Bulls, things like that that I've removed. I'm down to 1 cup of coffee in the morning. That's it. I've noticed that
Mhm.
has done so many things psychologically, physically, and mentally for me by just drinking 1 cup of coffee a day.
Mhm.
Now I will have the occasional Red Bull, but I
Mhm.
don't drink like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 a day anymore. I don't do
Right.
those horrible things to my body anymore. And it's tough. It's not easy. And I think for me, I am my own worst critic, man. I will kick the shit out of myself worse than anyone else could
Mhm.
possibly say or do to me on any given day. But it's like it's okay to start over and it can start at any time, I guess is, the
Yeah.
moral of the story.
Yeah. You don't have to start the diet on Monday.
Right.
Right? Like, you could start it on a Thursday, you'll be fine. You don't have to start that workout plan on a Monday. Just because, your workout regimen that you Googled says on Monday do this, on Wednesday do this, like, cool, start your workout on a Wednesday. Who gives a shit? Like, that's the big thing. It's the New Year's resolution idea, right? Like, well, we're halfway through December. I'll start on January 1st. And be like, well, you'll be done by January 2nd, you know?
Mm,
Um, but no, I love that because that's absolutely right. It's like, you don't have to wait. It can start. You know how many times I've thrown packs of cigarettes away like that? And
mhm,
then you go dig them out of the trash because you're an addict.
mhm, mhm.
I've done that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man.
Yeah.
What a great conversation, Daniel. Um, I will probably end up calling you Danny or Dan at some point in time.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's different when it's like somebody does it on purpose just to be an ass, right? Like,
yeah.
that's when I'm like, hey, listen. But usually people will pick up on it. They'll go Dan, and then the next time they'll go, shit, I called him Dan a minute ago, and
Mm,
they'll correct it, and it is what it is. But yeah, generally I don't care. But it usually depends on who's doing it in the context of the conversation for sure.
no doubt. I'll try my damnedest, I swear to you. I
Yeah,
think I caught myself calling you Danny at the retreat. I don't
you
even know.
probably did.
I don't even know if you picked up on it or not.
I probably missed it, but
Yeah.
yeah,
No, but cool. I'm glad we got to have this conversation. I
for
know
sure.
it's impacted somebody that's out there that either is listening now or will catch it on the replay. If you did catch half of this, check it out on Apple, Google, YouTube. Vic will have it out there on YouTube. And of course, anytime on Facebook, on my personal page, I'm sure on Daniel's page, on Beyond the ToolBelt's page, and TC Backer's page. Daniel, you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with before we tune out here?
Nope, just go be good people, man. Just go do right in the world, and the universe will have a way of rewarding you in the end. I live by that, and I think that's we need more of that. We need more good people in the world. We need more good conversations like this. So I appreciate you, Ty, for sure.
No doubt. For sure, man. Me too. And that's the silver bullet, man. Just be good no matter what. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will catch you next week, coming live from Irving, Texas, SRC Summit. We'll see you next week. Till then, take care of each other. Thank you.